I want to introduce our speaker, and she's also going to be leading us from the piano and the organ today, Mary McDonald. She is a 1978 graduate of Carson-Newman and really a legend in our music department and all across the country. She has been composing and orchestrating music for over 40 years. She lives here in Knoxville, and she is the first woman president of the Southern Baptist Church Music Conference. She recently retired from serving 36 years as the accompanist for the Tennessee Men's Choral, touring internationally to Brazil, England, Wales, and Italy. In 2010, after serving as a senior music editor for the Lorenz Corporation in Dayton, Ohio for more than 20 years, Mary resigned her position in order to serve the church in a different way. Now she takes her tremendous passion and love for music, making directly to churches as an independent artist. And so she is someone, she and her husband Brian have been married for 43 years and live they live in the Smoky Mountains of Dandridge, Tennessee. And so we're just privileged to have her today. We also have the a cappella choir with us today. But the music department here at Carson-Newman is such a great department, such a great standard of what they produce here in our region and all over the country. And Mary is just one of our products of the Carson-Newman Music Department. So if you would, just give a hand to our music department here and all the other aspects of that today. And we are so thankful. We are thankful for Mark Hasung and his leadership. And so I'm just going to get out of the way and let Mary lead us this morning. And then
everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. And this is surreal to come back after, I think this is my 45th year as a graduate. Finally paid off my bill here. And, but it is special indeed to come back into this sanctuary where in one moment the trajectory of my life's path changed. I want to thank Jeremiah and John, especially for the invitation to be here, and especially the a cappella choir. I was privileged to be a part of that choir for 3.5 years. And I had two children who also graduated Carson-Newman, one in 2005 and another in 2009, and we have paid off their bills. So I now have grandchildren. We have 5 grandkids, and I've already begun showing the oldest one the campus. So I will never be a wealth because of this wonderful place. But what a great school and what a great opportunity you have to be students where you are right here today. I was asked to share my testimony because my journey through Carson-Newman is very unique. It really, in some ways, was God leading me into the path of music. I've been doing music since I was a little girl. I played piano since I was 5 years old, but I have never had a piano lesson in my life. I've always played my heart. Somebody said long ago, you play by ear. I said, no, I just kind of play what I feel and what comes out. I grew up in a home in Knoxville, Tennessee, the youngest of 6 kids, and we didn't have everything we ever wanted. We had all of our needs met. My dad worked hard to see to it that we had anything we ever needed. We were involved very much so in the Central Baptist Church of Fountain City. Mom saw to it we were in all the choir programs, from children's choir on up. The youth choir, which was thriving at the time. Church was where everybody wanted to be. Many of the people who went to the school at Central High School went to Central Baptist Church, so we were friends in the community at large. I really think that Mom had us involved in all these programs because it was free child care. And, she's got 6 kids, and get them to church because that's a good way to get them out of her hair. But I'm so grateful for that because it instilled within me a love for church and for the music program and for church music, for hymns, for music that the organist would play or the pianist would play. And all that kind of filtered in and became part of my DNA. Now, my mom was a pianist. She also played by ear. And she tried diligently to teach the older 2 or 3 siblings how to play piano. She had the old John Thompson Red Book. Anybody ever study piano lessons in here? I just want to see some hands. Anybody forced to study piano lessons? Your mom? Yeah, there are a few. How many of you are still in counseling because of what Mom made you do? Well, Mom tried to work with my older 2 or 3 siblings and giving them the John Thompson manual and method of playing. And then when they would slide off of the piano bench, I would go to the piano. And being the youngest of 6, I didn't get to take the lessons, but I would listen to what they played, and then I would arrange it. And so my arranging began at a very young age. We just ran out of years. And I know my mother called me about 15 years ago. She said, Mary Beth, if you still want to study, honey, it's your turn. And I said, no, Mom, I got a concert, but thank you. I loved being a part of the church, and I was fascinated with the organ. We had this beautiful 27-rank pipe organ that was installed in 1970. Many afternoons, my mother, who was a school teacher, would tell my sister and I to cross the street between the school and the church, where there was about a 45-minute wait time from the time that she got out to the time that we were released. So we were to go to the church and do our homework. But I had no interest in doing my homework. My sister would diligently pull out her books and do her work, but I would slide in the choir loft and listen to our organist, who would be preparing for an upcoming service. I remember her giving me an invitation to come and sit with her on the bench one afternoon, and she wanted me to turn pages when she was playing this difficult piece. I couldn't read music, so I would just stare at her like, now, do I turn now? But it was such a thrill to sit there and see the mighty instrument and all the buttons and the sounds that it would make, the glorious sounds. And I fell in love with the organ at a very young age. When I was a junior in high school, our organist had to retire due to her health. At the time, we were without a minister of music. I went to our interim minister of music and told him I had been studying the organ. I had been studying nothing. But he didn't know, and he gave me a key to the organ. I remember the first time, y'all, I sat down at that pipe organ, moved the lid back, and all of Miss Beverly's music was gone, her shoes, and there was nothing there. All I had was my algebra book. And so I put it up on the music rack so it looked like legitimate music, but I would sit there and play the organ by ear, playing music that I had heard Miss Beverly play. I would turn the pages in the algebra book. That's the most use I ever got out of the algebra book. And one afternoon, a lady came through the sanctuary. She said, "Mary Beth, I didn't know you played organ." I didn't either, as a matter of fact. But she said, "We're having Youth Sunday in a few weeks, and I would love for you to play organ." Now, Youth Sunday back in the day was when all the young people had to assume various roles. We'd have a youth pastor, a youth music leader, and a pianist, organist. The youth choir would sing. We'd all have to teach Sunday school whether we wanted to or not. And I agreed to play because I had my eyes on a young man who was in the youth choir. I wanted him to ask me on a date. And so my organ prelude, I knew he liked Elton John. And my organ prelude Youth Sunday was The Funeral for a Friend by Elton John. In the bulletin, I called it Prelude in A minor by E. John. So I found I could combine it with Holy, 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 and nobody knew any different. And he loved it. The offertory was the theme of the movie Brian Song, about the football player. Are y'all familiar with that? Brian Piccolo. And I played that theme for my offertory. The guys were sitting back there nudging him and said, "Brian, that's for you, man." And well, he asked me out, and we've just celebrated our 43rd wedding anniversary. So, yeah, isn't that sweet? So the power of playing secular music for offertories will get you a husband. There you go. Well, my dad was old school. He wanted all of us, there were 5 girls, and he wanted all of us to be able to raise a family, to be able to make clothes. My mom was a seamstress, and to be able to cook and basically take care of house. So to go to Carson-Newman College, it was college at the time, we were told we would major in home economics. It wasn't a choice. We were just given a room and board scholarship in the home ec department. And I don't even think it's called that anymore. What's it called? Some of you home ec people is something science. Is it family science? Family, okay. It's gotten fancier, but it was home ec at the time. And all of my 4 sisters had preceded me with just excellent reputations, doing so great in the department. And then I came along and was failing chemistry within the first 6 weeks. Now, me and chemistry just are oil and water. I just don't get it. I don't know if it's the hairspray or what, but it doesn't penetrate inside here. But I couldn't do chemistry. And I remember studying so hard. I lived over here in Burnett, cramming for a test all night. Do you all ever do that? No. Some of you are studying right now for a test you have in just a minute, and I'm understanding that. But I overslept the exam. Have you ever done that? And so about 5 minutes to 8, I had to get to the science building from Burnett, and I realized I wasn't going to make it. I realized I really hadn't learned anything. So rather than going to the science building, I came through these doors. I sat about 3/4 of the way back here on the left side. There was a young student preparing for an upcoming recital playing the organ. It was unlike anything I had ever heard Miss Beverly play at Central Baptist. I was mesmerized listening to her play this glorious music, classical music, that was just lifting the roof in the air. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And it brought me so much joy just hearing the music that I forgot that I had just failed chemistry. I realized that my dad was going to now kill me because I was going to be the first student of his to fail college and to be sent packing. So I sat there and prayed. I said, "Lord, what do you want me to do? I don't know. I know that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing." But I found some courage over the next half hour to come up here onto this platform. As she was gathering her things and making her way off the platform, I asked her if I could play the organ. And without even looking at me so much, she took a clipboard that had a little putt-putt pencil on a string and pivoted toward me, and I signed my name to play in 2 weeks from that day. Well, 2 weeks from that day was Friday morning at 10 a.m., and it was chapel. I had never played that organ in my life, but we used to open every chapel with a big organ prelude. I didn't care. I just wanted to play the organ. So I took my chemistry book and I put it up on the music rack. Had no music, but I played my heart out. I didn't care. I was already failing. I was going home. I had nothing to lose. I was at rock bottom. I played that service with all of my heart and thinking, this is where my passions lie. after that service, I gathered my book off of the rack and shut the organ down and was coming off of this platform. And coming down this side aisle was the head of the music department at the time, Dr. Lewis Ball. And he was joined with his wife and organ professor, Mary Charlotte Ball. And they drew closer to me. I knew who they were, but they had no clue who I was. I reached my hand out to take his, and he did not receive it. But he said, "Young lady, who are you? And why are you playing the organ?" I told him I was a freshman home economics major, sir. He said, "Did you not know only our junior and senior organ students are allowed to play?" And I didn't know that. But his wife touched my shoulder. She said, "Excuse me, but now, was that a Bach prelude you were playing?" Folks, I looked her square in the eye. I said, "Ma'am, I didn't mean to. If it was, I'm real sorry. I didn't know who Bach was." But she realized I was playing classical music, just not the way it was originally written. I was arranging classical music. I was arranging Bach. And they took me over to his office that very moment and asked me a lot of questions about who I was and why I thought I could play the organ. I explained my situation with home economics and how I was struggling and how I just happened in here to pray. And I signed up to play and didn't intend to be in chapel. I just wanted to play the organ. I think at that moment, everything turned around because these two people saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. And she began to ask me questions. She said, "Could you play a hymn?" And I could play any hymn in any key. I didn't even know what a key was. But she would say, "Just play a hymn." And then he would ask me to play some other song, and I could play anything. I can play anything by ear. But I didn't know what I was doing. And finally he said, "Would you play a C major scale?" And I said, "A who what?" He said, "You don't know where C is, do you?" I said, "No, sir." And she said, "You know, I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to take you on as a student." And I think she did live to regret it. But she would make assignments for me, y'all, that I would, at the time we just had record albums. Do you know what albums are? Those are big round vinyl things, and some of them. But I would check out the record album and listen to it and learn it by ear and then show up for lessons right here in this sanctuary, put the music on the rack, and I would be playing it perfectly. I just had no idea where I was in the music. I would just assume enough time has passed, I should make a page turn. And I would just reach up and turn the page, and she would reach up, turn it back, and point at the correct measure I should be on. Then she started checking out the music before making the assignment, so it got a little more challenging. But my husband was a student at University of Tennessee, so I went back there and I would listen to it. So I found ways to get around the system. Somehow, by God's grace, I graduated with a church music degree in organ. My daddy found out that I had switched to music as a major my senior year. My mom said he'll be better off if we don't tell him till we have to. So she brought him up here for my senior recital in this very room. And I thought after the recital he would kill me. But he told me I did a good job. He said, "Now you'll never make anything being a music major unless you write country music." My daddy was a believer in Loretta Lynn. And I never wrote for Loretta Lynn. But when I graduated here, I went back to Knoxville. I found a little church over the hill from my home church, Beaver Dam Baptist Church. And I served as organist there. I sat about 3.5 years on the left side of the sanctuary surrounded by ferns. But it was during that 3.5 years that I was encouraged with the arrangements that I was doing. I couldn't read music very well even then. So rather than try to read other people's music, I would arrange hymns and improvise my way through preludes, offertories, and postludes. After about 6 weeks, my minister of music came to me with a cassette tape. We now advanced to cassette tapes. And he said, "I've been recording a lot of your improvisations, and I think you need to write them down." I didn't know the first thing about writing music either. I had no composition courses. We'd had music arranging with Jim Peffel. I think that was the extent of it. I did everybody's homework for money. But I took that little cassette back home over Christmas, and my husband, he'd grown up with that mama who made him take 8 years of piano lessons. Brian is an architect in Knoxville, and he literally drew staff paper for me. He said, well, we need staff paper, so he made staff paper. And then as we listened to the cassette, he said, well, you played this, so if you're playing this chord, you want to write it down. And he kind of coached me through it, and it kind of came about naturally. I did it all with pencil in those early years. But I wrote 4 of the arrangements that were on that cassette and sent them to Nashville, and all were accepted for publication. It was a challenge. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, but I kind of thought that was a neat thing to have accomplished, and to see some music in Pedal Point magazine was fun, but it wasn't something I wished to pursue as a career. I continued to teach piano lessons. I had about 40 students at the time, taught between the church and my house, and my husband continued his education at University of Tennessee for 1 more year. And it was in 1980, 2 years after my graduation from here, that a man by the name of John Purefoy moved from Waco, Texas, where he had served as editor for Word Music, to Knoxville, Tennessee, of all places, to begin a publishing company. We were introduced by my minister of music, and I remember him vividly saying, you need to write choral music. And I said, sir, I can barely write any music. I know I don't have the ability to write words. And he picked up a Bible in one hand and a hymnal in the other. He said, this is all you ever need. And I have written over 1,200 publications now, and that is all I've ever used. I don't share all this story with you so that you're going, wow, she's all thinking of that of herself, because I don't. If anything, I guess I think more of what God can do in spite of me. And I remember who I was, that little girl that sat back here thinking my daddy's going to kill me for not doing home ec. And now I stand before you, sharing who I am in God's eyes as a composer. Reminds me of being in Harriman, Tennessee, a couple of years before COVID. Anybody from Harriman? Sweet little town, but you've got to be kind of going there to go there. You don't just happen there. And the church music secretary, they had invited me to do a composer weekend, but she inadvertently listed me as Mary McDonald, guest composer. So I thought, well, that's Tennessee for you. So I don't know. There has been a lot of compost, but sometimes compost fertilizes the ground from which compositions are born. And so I don't regret any of those years where I struggled, because those are years that kind of helped craft the foundation of who I am. God planted in me as a little 5-year-old girl a divine nugget of a gift, something very small, the ability to play the piano. But he was allowed to nurture that, to fertilize it through faith and family and friends, through the experience here at Carson-Newman University, through my friends, Angie, through other students, through the faculty, the balls, the administrators who encouraged me to stay on and to continue my quest in music, through a mother who I think the Lord must have given her divine intervention to not tell my father, because to this day it seems unremarkable that she didn't rat me out at a very young time, and my dad would have pulled me quickly. But how all of these things work together in kind of the mosaic of my life to shape and fashion who I am today. And I know God's doing the same thing in each and every one of you, because he has planted in each of us a divine nugget of some giftedness, whatever your gift, whether it be teaching or speaking or playing or a sport, athletics, or a gift of nursing, a gift of compassion, of mercy, or whatever your gift, your craft. God has put that in you, that passion, that yearning to be something. And that's what you're trying to manifest right now and trying to become. But I want to challenge you to not be so tight to the reins that you can't discern when God is moving you elsewhere. Because there's a lot of graduates, and I, over my travels, have heard this over and over again, who no longer do the thing they majored in. They studied one thing and they became something else. God's going to continue to lead you, and it's just a matter of letting go and saying, Lord, if you can use me, do so. I didn't mind playing the piano. I've played since I was 5, but having to speak is yet another challenge and something I never felt I was good at. The Lord led me to one church early on. This was in Maryville, Tennessee, where I was invited to do a piano concert. I think it was about 1982, 83. And I didn't want to speak, but the pastor said, when you're about halfway through your part of the program, if you would deliver a prayer, our ushers will come forth and take your love offering. And folks, I didn't mind playing, but I sure was scared about that prayer. Well, that morning, my pastor, Dr. Calvin Metcalf in Knoxville, he had prayed a prayer. It was so beautiful. It has stuck with me. He said, Lord, we're not here because we want to be. We're here because we need to be. How we need to sense and feel your presence in our life. I thought that was so profound. So I was going to use that prayer in that concert. And after 6 or 7 pieces of piano music, I got up to lead the prayer, and I said, at this time, the ushers will come forth to receive an offering. Let's pray. Lord, I'm not here because I want to be. And I knew that wasn't right. I knew that that prayer doesn't work in every circumstance, especially when you're the guest in the church. So I just said amen. And that night, in a wonderful crowd of 400 people, I took a love offering, about $6. They thought, oh, she doesn't want to be here. But God has a way of using you in spite of your inadequacies. He is sufficient. Listen to this scripture from the 2nd chapter of Philippians, verse 4. Such confidence we have through Christ before God, not that we are sufficient to claim anything for ourselves, only our sufficiency comes from God. He has made us competent as ministers of the new covenant, not of a letter, but of the Spirit. For the Spirit gives life. I want to share with you a piece, and as a preface to this, it's been a few years ago that I heard a documentary on the Eagles. I've always loved that Carson-Newman is the home of the Eagles. My husband and I have now kind of semi-retired over in Dandridge. We live on beautiful Douglas Lake, and we're right across from an Eagle sanctuary. And there are many mornings that we sit out and just watch the Eagles fly from our home to the trees. And this documentary talked about the Eagles. And I always wondered why Carson-Newman is the home of the Eagles. So it sparked my interest. But it talks about how most birds, when there's an oncoming storm, will hunker down. And they will seek refuge and hide away from the storm. But not the eagle. The eagle sees the oncoming storm and flies directly into it, using the winds aloft to rise above the storm, where it can soar with great ease. Isn't that a beautiful picture of who we are? You're going to face adversity. You're going to face challenges, and there may be somebody in here who's even struggling like I was and thinking, this is not the right major. What I remember I did in that row 3/4 of the way back was to pray. If you can use her, I know you can use me. I'm reminded of how Moses was challenged to lead the children out of Egypt. And he stuttered. And he says, Lord, get somebody who can speak well. And God says, no, I want you. And how David was challenged to defeat the giant. And I'm sure he was like, Lord, no, get someone his size. And God said, no, David, I want you. And I think I face those battles many times. Lord, why are you leading me to Italy to lead a concert? Why are you leading me to New York to play at Carnegie Hall? Why would you do this? And he says, because I want you to go. Maybe it's the unassuming who can only give God the glory. So I give him the glory for all he has done. I want to share with you, and usually I use music to advance my story, but since I'm mostly sharing with you by words, an arrangement I did several years ago of On Eagle's Wings, and it seems so fitting to share this in this sanctuary today. The words say, he will lift you up on eagle's wings, set you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine as the sun, but hold you in the palm of his hand. I wouldn't be here today without God lifting me up as an eagle, enable me to soar against the challenges that I faced. And I give him all the glory for it. I'm going to share this piece and come back and introduce the song the choir will sing, and we'll close. in 2010, no, 2000, I guess it was, Mary Charlotte asked me to compose an anthem to surprise her husband, Dr. Ball, for their 50th wedding anniversary. She gave me free rein to do anything I chose, and I couldn't help but reminisce over the impact those two had in my life. And so I selected the hymn, Crown Him with Many Crowns. It is set in 3 distinct sections. One, the life of peace, that God is the Lord of peace, that God is the Lord of life, and that He is the Lord of love. And so as I leave you today with this message, I want you to call on God for your peace. Live your life fully for Him and love one another with the love of the Lord. May God bless your divine nugget of giftedness for His kingdom's work. Thank you and God bless.
Our benediction comes from Psalm 100 today. It says this: shout to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before Him singing with joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we are His. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture. Enter His gates with thanksgiving. Go into His courts with praise. Give thanks to Him and praise His name. For the Lord is good. His unfailing love continues forever, and His faithfulness continues to each generation. I just want to echo what Mary McDonald said, that all of you in this room have a purpose and a plan. I hope today that through her testimony and through this worship that you were able to hear that, see that from the Lord, and that you will go out and realize that purpose that God has for you.